Welcome to the Saturday skirt sewing pattern tutorial, sew along, whatever you'd like to call it. I'm excited to jump in and get started. First, I do want to mention there's a little bit of video difficulties, but I do think the instructions and everything translated well through this video, so I hope it works out for you, but feel free to message me if you have any questions anywhere along the way. Alright, let's get started. This is my fabric for view B. You're going to see a couple views interchangeably in here because of some recording errors I had. So I started by interfacing one waistband piece. Here is my view D that I'm also popping in here. That waistband piece is already interfaced, and then I'm going to take my belt loop piece if you are choosing to do a belt loop. If you didn't cut it on the selvage, serge one edge now, and then I'm going to take this to the iron and press it in thirds. So the raw edge is going to be folded over first, and then the serged edge is going to be folded on top of it to sort of enclose it. So if you could tell, that's the wrong side, and I'm folding wrong sides together, and then that serged edge over the raw edge. So when you're at this point, you will only see the right side of your fabric, then do 2 rows of top stitching. And that's what it should look like, if you can even see that stitching on there, but it's all closed up and that raw edge is sealed. All you can see is either the selvage or your serged edge. Next, if you are doing view A or B, you're going to sew 2 rows of basting stitches. Basically leave a long thread tail and set your sewing machine stitch length to like 4 or whatever the longest is, and then you will pull the bobbin threads and that will start to gather up your fabric. I just do that until it matches the length of the yoke, and then I will tie a knot on both sides. I know those gathers don't look neat or pretty or even at all, but I get it to the right length, tie the knot, and then adjust the gathers to lay more evenly. And then another little thing I do is take it to the iron after that and press all those gathers flat. It makes it a whole lot easier to sew the pieces together, the yoke that is not gathered with the skirt piece that is gathered. So this step is where I need to be extra careful since there's no wrong side, right side. I just need to make sure I end up with mirrored pieces. And if you're doing view C or D, you don't have to do any gathering. Match up your pieces, right sides together. And one little tip if you are doing view A or C is to sew a stay stitch on your yoke and snip into it so you can fit those curves in a little better. So after you sew those pieces together and serge that edge, or finish it with a zigzag stitch, or get super fancy and use bias tape. Anyway, press it up, press that seam allowance, that finished edge up, and then up to the yoke, and then we are going to take it back to the sewing machine and do a top stitch on the yoke side just to catch that seam allowance and hold it up, and then finish those long edges of each skirt panel. So for this example, on the denim, I used a top stitching thread, which is just a heavier weight, and in this case, that golden, traditional top stitching thread that you see on denim. So instead of just 1 row, I ended up doing 2 rows of top stitching, and it's just up to you. That was like a decorative, traditional denim sort of look I was going for. That is completely optional, but if you're doing denim, I think it looks pretty good. That's my opinion. But anyway, repeat this for all of your pieces, and if you are doing view A or C, you will have made an additional side piece, so you will have extra pieces to do this on. Same amount of stitching, just don't forget those side pieces, the left side pieces that you've made in a step 3. Anywho, we are going to get into measuring for your zipper in the next step. So if you are doing view B or D, just choose your left side. Like there's 2 other pieces that are identical to this, so it doesn't really matter until you get the zipper in, but just choose your left side. If you're doing view A or C, you made your left side in step 3, so use those pieces. And then I'm going to match up right sides together. I'm going to match up that yoke seam first, then the notch you just drew, and that notch down to the hem is where I'm going to sew with the 3/8 inch 1 centimeter seam allowance. After sewing that for the area above the notch, you are going to fold over by a 1/2 inch and press that down as if it was sewn up seam allowance basically. You're going to do that for both sides and then press the rest of the seam open. And remember that was only 3/8 inch 1 centimeter, so it'll be a little bit less. But anyway, this is how mine's looking, pressed open seam and then a 1/2 inch folded over above and pressed. And now I'm going to take my zipper. Don't judge me, this was the only zipper in the right size in my stash. I didn't really think this ahead, but it's brown, but you can't see it anyway. It's a lap zipper, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to take that wonderful wash away tape, and this is how my little trick, I like shake it and pull it so that the covering comes off easier. Otherwise it takes forever to pull that plastic piece off. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm just gonna line this down the zipper on both sides right next to the zipper teeth. See, I did that like pull thing again. If you know, you know. Like this can get gnarly. If you like snip it off, it is so hard to get that like white sticky covering off of the other sticky side. Yeah, so just pull it and stretch it, and then it tears off and you have a little like tab you can pull. It's silly how difficult that is if you don't like do that. Anyway, so I'm from the right side of the zipper. If the right side of the zipper is facing me on the right side, I'm going to pull that off, that covering off, and then I'm going to take what is the back of my skirt. So if your skirt is right side facing up, it'll be on your right hand side. And so that part you folded over or you folded under by a 1/2 inch, you're going to now press that folded edge down on that sticky tape on the side of the zipper right next to the zipper teeth. And I'm just trying to like explain all that as well as I can so you don't get things confused. Like this step is very easy, but it can be, I don't know, it can just be explained weird. So I'm going to literally do the same exact thing on my other skirt sample here. I'm going to stick that wash away tape down on both sides of my zipper, and for the denim one I'm actually using like a legit denim zipper with like metal teeth and whatnot, so it's a little scary when I was sewing it kind of blind, but trust the process, I suppose. Like nothing bad happened, it was all good. But anyway, and this tape is so cool, like if you can find it, it just like, it's literally double-sided tape and then it disappears in the wash, it dissolves. And if you don't have this tape, you can literally use pins. It is totally fine. Anyway, I am lining up that top edge of my skirt, like basically pre-waistband, obviously, top edge of the skirt with the top edge of the zipper, and then pressing down that folded edge. Remember we folded over a 1/2 inch, that folded edge right there, right up against the zipper teeth, honestly like a millimeter away, because I don't want like my zipper to get stuck or anything, but right, you can see right next to the zipper tape, and then you can see if you flip it over, you're catching that folded edge. And just make sure it's all pressed or pinned in place, and then make sure to swap to your zipper foot. That's going to keep you from running into the zipper teeth, especially if they're metal. You do not want to do that. I mean, regardless, you don't want to run into your zipper teeth. But anyway, swap to your zipper foot. And then you're going to sew from the right side, just right next to those zipper teeth. And you may have to move your zipper out of the way, the zipper pole, but I didn't have to for that one. And then I swapped to my top stitching thread for the denim version, and I'm going to do the same exact thing, just right next to that folded edge. And your zipper foot should keep you away from the zipper teeth, but it is always a little bit stressful when you have a metal zipper. Okay, but now the back of the skirt zipper is done, and you're going to do basically something very similar for the front. And the front has the lap, so just remember that when you're sewing your zipper, that front is the lap, and it is, when you're looking at it this way, the right side of the skirt, it is the left. The left is going to be the front, and the left is going to be the lap. And I start by lining up my yoke seam, and then also making sure that fold is covering that stitching line we just did. and then I just press it in place all the way down. So here's what it looks like when I've just pressed it in place with that tape. I have that yoke seam lined up, and then that flap just barely covering the stitching line. And then from the wrong side, you just like can turn it over and check that it's gonna catch the edge of your piece that you folded over. But now you're gonna take this to the sewing machine and sew from the right side and swap the zipper foot and just feel with your finger and trust your zipper foot and sew alongside those teeth. Thanks to the filming difficulties I mentioned earlier, I do not have that on video. But the next step is to take your interfaced waistband and place it right side together. You're going to match up that centerfold notch, the center line of your waistband, to your right side seam or your right side notch. It'll be a notch if you're sewing view A or C, and it'll be a side seam, a right side seam, if you're sewing view B or D. So line up the center of your waistband with the right side and then pin it all the way around. You should have some waistband hanging off of the edge on both sides of the zipper. So basically your ending point is the zipper, and you will have like an inch or two hanging off as just extra safety. And one side is for the flap, but waistbands can get funky, and just you always want to make sure you have enough. After you sew that in place, it's going to look a little bubbly if you've got a thick fabric like this, but just either way, press that seam allowance up into the waistband. And then if you're using belt loops, now's the time to cut them into 3.5-inch sections, and you should have 5. This is view C. I put the belt loops in the same place, it just looks different because the yoke seam lines are a little bit different. Your next step is to press that edge of the waistband up 3/8 inch and then pin it right sides together, or clip it right sides together with the already sewn on waistband. I start sewing that waistband together from the back side of the skirt, from the bottom of the waistband up, and that's going to feel like a whole lot of seam allowance, but you're just going to go straight from those zipper teeth on the back side of the skirt up and then pivot and sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. And then when you get towards the front, you will sew out on that flap of the waistband and then down about 1.5 inches, and then stop your stitch. Then you're going to want to snip those corners and then that excessive seam allowance from the back side waistband. Snip the corners and then flip the waistband right side out. And then you're going to finally see what this is here that I'm doing. Your corners of the waistband and that waistband tab where the button will be, they will be like perfect corners basically. And then I would press the waistband at that point, and then now I'm using that oh so wonderful wash away tape again. Of course you can use pins if you'd like. I don't like. I like this wash away tape. Anyway, now you're going to take that to your sewing machine and top stitch, and I like to start from that back side again because that is going to be covered by the flap, so you won't see any back stitching that you may do as you top stitch the entire perimeter of your waistband. Then if you're doing belt loops, fold that bottom piece of the belt loop up and then basically flatten it straight down and stitch it right into place on your skirt for all 5 of them. And now I'm folding over my flap and finding that center point, and then grabbing my button and marking each edge of my button and using that center point to draw a line, a straight line through that edge, so I get a buttonhole that is right on the center of my waistband. And I'll sew that in place, and then I'm going to use this buttonhole opener, which is one of the coolest little gadgets. I was like so done like accidentally stabbing myself opening buttonholes. But that's just me. Once you get your buttonhole open, I'm going to fold the waistband back over with the zipper zipped up, and then I'm just going to, with my wash away ink, mark the center point of the buttonhole so that I have the perfect spot for my button, to sew my button on. Literally just line it up with the zipper up, make sure it's nice and flat, and then poke a little dot right through that buttonhole you just opened up and grab your button to sew it on. And you've got one last thing to do, and that is to hem. After you sew on your button, fold up a 1/4 inch and then a 1/2 inch, press it and stitch it in place, and then ta-da, you have your finished Saturday skirt. Thank you so much for bearing with me through this tutorial as I had so many filming issues. I hope you got the idea. I hope all the steps are clear enough with the instructions, and I really, really, really hope you enjoy your Saturday skirt. Thank you for watching and sewing and sharing this pattern. I would love to see it.